Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are coming to you with some high energy today for a very special segment we are calling Learn English Easy.
That's right.
I'm your host, and as always, I'm joined by our resident expert.
It's great to be here.
Now, I have to say, looking at the calendar, it's Monday, January 19th, 2026. And is it just me, or does it feel like the entire world woke up on the wrong side of the bed this week?
It certainly feels a bit tense out there. I think Blue Monday is taking on a whole new geopolitical meaning this year.
Seriously, I was just doom scrolling the headlines this morning as you do, and honestly, I considered just packing a bag, finding a remote island, and just going completely off the grid.
Sounds tempting.
It does, just unplug from all the drama. But then I realized, looking at our first topic today, apparently even the remote islands are for sale now.
Or, if not for sale, they're being leveraged in these high-stakes poker games between superpowers.
Exactly, and then I thought, okay, forget the island, I'll just leave the planet. But as we're going to find out, the rent on Mars is even higher, and the landlords are, let's just say they're even stricter.
Right. The core economic engine of Northern Europe.
And the ultimatum attached to this tariff is, it's just wild.
It's completely unprecedented. The tariffs kick in on February 1st, 2026. That's just a couple of weeks away.
And he stated they'll rise to 25% by June 1st.
Unless, and this is the big unless, unless a deal is reached for the United States to purchase Greenland.
Purchase Greenland. It just sounds absurd when you say it out loud. I saw the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, came out almost immediately.
She did. Her response was very clear.
She just said Greenland is not for sale, which is, I guess, the polite diplomatic way of saying, are you out of your mind?
Right. But here's where it gets really interesting. This feels new and shocking because of the tariff threat attached to it, that economic coercion. But the idea itself of the U.S. buying Greenland, that is actually a recurring American obsession.
Really? I remember Trump floated it back in his first term, maybe 2019 or so, and it was dismissed as, well, as just Trump being Trump, but it goes back further than that.
Much, much further. You have to go all the way back to the aftermath of the Civil War, 1867.
No way. The Seward era. The same guy who bought Alaska from the Russians.
The very same Secretary of State William Seward. People forget this, but the State Department actually commissioned a big report back then.
And what did it say?
It concluded that Greenland was both geographically and strategically part of North America. So Seward went to the Danes and offered them $5.5 million for it.
$5.5 million, which, even adjusting for inflation, is what? A rounding error in today's federal budget.
Basically pocket change. But the Danes said no. So you fast forward, 1946, World War II is over, the Cold War is just starting to heat up.
And a new president has an idea.
President Harry Truman, he puts a very serious offer on the table. He offered Denmark $100 million.
In cash.
In gold.
Right.
$100 million in gold bars.
Wow. Okay, so Truman was serious. Why was he so desperate for a giant block of ice in 1946?
In that era, it was all about nuclear deterrence. You have to remember, This is before ICBMs, before intercontinental missiles.
Oh, wait, it was all about bombers.
It was all about bombers. And if you wanted to strike the Soviet Union, or if they wanted to strike the U.S., you needed long-range bombers. And to get those bombers over the North Pole, you needed a base, a forward operating base.
Cool.
Exactly. The Thule Air Base, now it's called Pawtucket Space Base, for decades, it was the unsinkable aircraft carrier at the top of the world.
So for Truman, it was about bombers. But for Trump, in 2026, the why has shifted, hasn't it? It's not just about dropping bombs anymore.
No, the strategic calculus has evolved completely. It's now a three-legged stool: geopolitics, resources, and climate change.
Okay, let's break those down. Let's start with geopolitics. I kept seeing this term GIUK gap in the naval journals we looked at.
The GIUK gap. It stands for Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom. If you picture a map, it's the stretch of ocean between those three land masses.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
That gap is the most critical maritime choke point in the entire northern hemisphere. Historically, and even more so today, with Russia's modernizing fleet, it's the gateway.
The gateway for what?
For the Russian Navy. If their submarines, especially the nuclear subs from their northern fleet in Murmansk, want to get into the open Atlantic,
to threaten U.S. shipping or the East Coast?
They have to pass through that gap. There's no other way. It's a funnel.
And Greenland is the western wall of that funnel.
Precisely. So if you control Greenland, you control the airfields, the ports, the underwater sensor arrays that monitor that entire gap. If you lose access, you are essentially flying blind in the North Atlantic.
And I guess that ties back to the Pacific space too, right?
Absolutely. That base is still America's northernmost military outpost. It houses the solid-state phased array radars for the missile warning system.
So it's our eyes on the sky.
It's the tripwire. If an attack comes over the pole, that's the first place that sees it. If the U.S. relationship with Denmark sours to the point where they kick us out, American missile defense takes a massive, massive hit.
Okay, so militarily, it feels almost non-negotiable. But let's talk about the treasure hunt aspect, the resource rush.
This is where the whole trade war angle starts to make a lot more sense. Greenland is sitting on a geological lottery ticket.
The notes here mention rare earth elements, REEs. We hear about these all the time in tech news. What are they exactly?
They're a group of 17 elements: neodymium, dysprosium, yttrium. They're the things that make modern technology work. They're inside your iPhone, your electric car motor, the guidance system of a Tomahawk missile.
And right now, we don't control the supply chain for that.
Not even close. Right now, China has an effective stranglehold on the market. They control something like 80% of the global processing for rare earths.
So we're critically dependent on our biggest geopolitical rival for the stuff we need to build our most advanced defense systems.
It's a glaring strategic weakness, a huge one. But Greenland has a site called Kvanefjeld. The geology there is incredibly unique.
And it's full of these elements.
It's one of the largest undeveloped deposits in the world. The estimates in these journals suggest that if that one project was fully developed, it could reduce Western dependency on China by 30%.
30% from a single mine. That would change the global supply chain overnight.
It completely reshapes it. And it's not just rare earths. We're talking massive deposits of uranium, zinc, iron ore. And then there's the energy angle.
Oil and gas.
The U.S. Geological Survey estimates there could be around 17 billion barrels of oil equivalents off the coast, just waiting to be accessed.
17 billion barrels. Okay, suddenly the not for sale sign from the Danish PM looks less like a hard rejection and more like a starting position for a negotiation.
And that brings us to the third leg of the stool, which ironically is what enables this whole resource rush in the first place, climate change.
A melting ice.
Exactly. As the Arctic ice sheet retreats, it's doing two things. One, it's making those minerals physically accessible. You can actually get mining equipment in there now in ways you couldn't 20 years ago.
And two,
it's opening up new shipping lanes, the Northwest Passage, the Transpolar Sea Route.
The routes that cut travel time between Asia and Europe by weeks?
Correct. And Greenland is becoming the gatekeeper of these new routes. If a significant amount of global shipping moves from the Suez Canal to the Arctic to save time and fuel, whoever owns Greenland effectively owns the toll booth on the world's newest superhighway.
So we get the why. Geopolitics, resources, climate. It's a strategic no-brainer. But I still can't wrap my head around the how. How do you price a country?
Lasses. It is the ultimate real estate appraisal problem.
Right. Usually when you buy real estate, you look at comps in the neighborhood. But it's not like Iceland sold recently.
One country, slightly used, icy exterior, great views. No. But the financial sources we looked at actually break it down into two different valuation methods.
Okay, lay it on me. How do the economists run the numbers on this?
So the first method is what they call the what you get valuation. This looks strictly at the intrinsic value of the resources.
The minerals in the ground.
Exactly. If you just take the known mineral reserves, the stuff we know for sure is there and we can technically reach with current technology, the low-end estimates start around $186 billion.
That seems shockingly low. I mean, Twitter was bought for $44 billion. A whole country with strategic dominance is only worth like 4 Twitters?
Well, that's the most conservative estimate. It's based on current commodity prices and accounts for the very high cost of extraction in the Arctic.
So that's the floor. What's the ceiling?
If you look at the total resource potential, assuming technology improves, prices go up, and you can eventually extract everything, some of these numbers go as high as $4.4 trillion.
Okay, that's a bit of a spread. $186 billion to over $4 trillion. That's a pretty wide margin of error for a negotiation.
It is, which is why the second method is maybe more useful. It's the where you get it method. This is all about the strategic location value.
You compare it to other big land purchases.
You think of it like the Louisiana Purchase, or more accurately, the purchase of Alaska.
Location, location, location.
Exactly. So what these economists did is they took the price the U.S. paid for Alaska in 1867. They adjusted it for the size of the land, adjusted for over 150 years of inflation, and then, and this is the key part, they created a multiplier for the growth in GDP and strategic value.
And what number do they land on?
The most credible estimates hover around $2.76 trillion.
2.76 trillion. I mean, it really is the ultimate real estate deal. But there's a catch, isn't there? A pretty big human-sized catch.
For tenants, the 57,000 people who actually live there.
The Greenlandic people.
Correct. We're not in 1867 anymore. You can't just transfer a deed and have the people come with it like property. Greenland has home rule, self-governance within the Kingdom of Denmark. They have a say.
And they have made it very clear they are not interested in being bought.
Which brings us to the fallout. Because Trump isn't just asking nicely or offering gold bars like Truman did. He's using tariffs as a cudgel. And this is spilling over into our second major topic for today, the transatlantic rift.
This is where the story shifts from, eccentric real estate deal to a potential global economic crisis. It's not just about an island anymore. It's about economic warfare between traditional allies.
The relationship is fraying badly. And the sources we read suggest the EU is preparing a pretty serious counterstrike.
They mentioned something called the Anti-Coercion Instrument, or ACI. That sounds intense. What is it?
Think of it as the EU's economic bazooka.
I like the sound of that.
It's a relatively new legal tool. It was actually designed and inspired by China's economic bullying of Lithuania a few years back.
Right, I remember that.
So the EU realized they needed a mechanism to hit back quickly and decisively when a superpower tries to blackmail one of his member states.
So how does it work in practice?
Basically, it allows the EU Commission to impose broad, sweeping restrictions on a country that's trying to use economic coercion. It bypasses the usual slow, bureaucratic process where every country has to agree. It's fast.
So if the U.S. is bullying Denmark with these tariffs to force the sale of Greenland,
the EU can, as a unified bloc, trigger the ACI and hit back.
And it's never been used against an ally like the U.S. before.
Never. This would be a massive escalation. And the reports say they have a list of retaliation targets ready to go. 93 billion euros worth of U.S. goods.
Let me guess. It's the usual suspects. The stuff that causes the most political pain.
Oh, yeah. Bourbon from Kentucky, Harley-Davidson motorcycles from Wisconsin, soy from the Midwest, aircraft from Washington State. They aim for the goods that will get senators on the phone to the White House.
But beyond this immediate, tit-for-tat trade spat, the sources we read highlight a much deeper, almost existential structural problem in Europe. They call it the competitiveness trilemma.
This was, for me, the most fascinating part of the EU economic reports. A trilemma, by definition, means you have three desirable goals, but mathematically, you can only ever achieve two of them at the same time.
Okay, so let's visualize this as a triangle. What are the three corners? What are the three things Europe wants?
Corner one, strict national fiscal rules. This is the traditional Northern European view. Countries like Germany and the Netherlands want to keep their debt low, their budgets balanced, and they don't want to overspend. Fiscal discipline.
Responsible accounting. Got it.
Corner two, industrial sovereignty. This is the French view, mostly. It means spending massive amounts of government money subsidies to build up your own industries. Green energy, AI, microchips. So you don't have to depend on China or the U.S.
Okay. Spending big to compete on the world stage.
And corner three, single market integrity. This is the core principle of the EU. It means keeping a level playing field for all 27 member states. You don't want a rich country like Germany unfairly subsidizing its car companies while Italy or Greece can't afford to, because that shatters the internal market.
I see the conflict already. If I pick fiscal discipline, so no big spending, and single market integrity, so no unfair subsidies,
then you can't have industrial sovereignty. You simply can't spend the trillions of euros needed to compete with America's Inflation Reduction Act or China's state-led model. Your rules forbid the debt. You fall behind technologically.
Right. Okay, so let's flip it. Say I panic about falling behind. I go all in on industrial sovereignty. I want to pump money into my key industries.
Well, then you have to break one of the other two corners. If you also want to keep your fiscal rules, then you're basically telling Germany, go ahead and spend your massive budget surplus on your industries.
But then the single market breaks.
The single market fractures completely. Because Germany has deep pockets and can bail out its industry, but a poorer EU nation can't. The united part of Europe falls apart as the rich get richer and the poor get left behind.
So the EU is currently trying to do all three at once.
They're trying to sit in the middle of the triangle doing a little bit of everything, and the result is paralysis. And while Europe is paralyzed, arguing with itself, the U.S. economy is just zooming ahead.
The data in these reports is pretty stark. It says the U.S. economy has been growing 1.3 times faster than the EU's consistently since 2021. That's a huge divergence.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And this leads to what the ING report called the vulnerability paradox.
Paradoxes and trilemmas. We're getting deep into the economic theory today. What is the vulnerability paradox?
So it used to be that when the U.S. economy grew, Europe grew too. Their economies were coupled. Europe would import American growth through trade.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
That was the old thinking. But the data now shows that link has been broken. The trade spillovers are near zero. So Europe has stopped importing U.S. growth.
So the U.S. economy booming doesn't really help Europe anymore?
Not directly, no. But, and here's the paradox, Europe still imports all of the U.S. volatility. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates or the U.S. stock market sneezes, Europe catches pneumonia.
So they get all the pain of the U.S. financial cycle, but none of the gain from the U.S. growth cycle.
You've got it. It's the worst of both worlds.
That sounds like a terrible deal. Why is that happening? What's the mechanism there?
It all comes down to a fundamental investment imbalance. European investors, pension funds, insurance companies are notoriously conservative. They buy a lot of safe assets.
Like U.S. Treasury bonds.
Billions of them. So European savings are, in effect, funding the U.S. government's debt at very low interest rates.
Europe is America's banker.
In a sense. Meanwhile, U.S. investors are far more aggressive. The data shows they hold about 80% of their European portfolios in equity in stocks. They buy the companies.
So Europe lends America the money to build cool stuff, and America uses that money to buy the cool stuff that Europe builds.
In a nutshell, yes. U.S. investors own the profits and the growth in Europe. European investors own the safe, low-yield debt in America. It's a structural problem that's draining wealth from one side of the Atlantic to the other.
And this brings us to the Sell America threat I saw mentioned in the Forex.com analysis. This sounds like the absolute nuclear option for Europe.
It is. European nations, both public and private, hold about $8 trillion in U.S. bonds and stocks. The speculation is, could the EU weaponize those capital flows?
What would that look like?
Could they threaten to dump U.S. assets if these Greenland tariffs get too high? Just start selling U.S. bonds en masse?
Sell America, crash the dollar, trigger a financial crisis in the U.S.
Theoretically, it's possible, but every expert quoted argues it's a strategy of financial mutual assured destruction. If you crash the dollar, you crash the value of the trillions of dollars in assets you're still holding.
You bankrupt yourself to hurt your opponent.
It's incredibly risky. But the very fact that it's even being discussed in serious financial circles shows you just how fractured this relationship has become.
It really feels like the tectonic plates of the West are drifting apart. You have the U.S. aggressively using its power to grab territory and resources, like with Greenland.
And you have Europe frantically trying to figure out how to maintain its own sovereignty and survive economically without being crushed.
And this obsession with resources and strategic dominance, it doesn't just stop at the atmosphere. It's not just about who owns the Arctic.
No, it does not. Which is the perfect transition to our third and maybe wildest story. Because if you think buying Greenland is ambitious, try building a self-sustaining city on Mars.
The ultimate frontier. We're talking about Elon Musk's vision, Occupy Mars. But today we aren't just talking about the dream or the hype. We are looking at the cold, hard engineering reality from these technical papers.
And the logistics are just mind-blowing. It's one thing to say, we're going to Mars. It's a completely other thing to actually build the interplanetary gas station to get you there.
Let's talk about that gas station problem. Most people, I think, just assume you launch a giant rocket and it flies straight to Mars. But you can't do that, right?
No, not even close. It's the tyranny of the rocket equation. Starship is the biggest rocket ever built, but just getting itself into low Earth orbit uses up almost all of its fuel.
Just to escape Earth's gravity well.
Exactly. So once you're in orbit, you're essentially running on fumes. You can't get to the moon, let alone Mars. You have to refuel.
In space.
In orbit. SpaceX calls it orbital refueling. The animations they've released, and we have the technical descriptions here in the source show, 2 massive starships docking belly to belly in space.
Belly to belly, like 2 whales cuddling in orbit.
Laughs. Something like that. But imagine doing that while you're both falling around the Earth at 17,000 miles per hour. And here is the physics problem that absolutely blew my mind.
Go on.
In zero gravity, liquids don't behave like liquids on Earth.
Right, they just float. They turn into these big amorphous blobs.
Exactly. So imagine you have this giant tank of liquid oxygen. In zero G, it's just floating around in the middle of the tank as a giant bubble. Now, if you turn on a massive turbopump that's designed to move tons of fuel per second, and that pump sucks in a pocket of gas instead of liquid.
That's called cavitation, right? It would destroy the pump.
Instant catastrophe. The pump overspins, shreds itself into pieces, and the engine would likely explode. So before they can transfer even a single drop of fuel, they have to perform a maneuver called settling thrust.
Settling thrust? What's that?
The ships have to use their small control thrusters to accelerate just a tiny bit forward. That creates a very slight G-force, a kind of pseudo-gravity, that gently pushes all that liquid fuel to the back of the tank where the pumps are.
Just enough to trick the fuel into thinking there's a down so the pumps can work properly?
Precisely. But think about the coordination required. You have to hold that thrust perfectly steady with two city block-sized ships docked together while hurtling around the planet. And the sources point out they have to do this maybe 15, even 20 times for a single Mars mission.
15 to 20 separate launches and dockings. That's a logistical nightmare. That's like playing air traffic controller for a fleet of rockets.
It is. That's a very high launch cadence. If just one of those tanker launches fails or gets delayed by weather for a few days, the super cold propellant in the orbital ship starts to boil off into space. You could miss your launch window to Mars, which only opens every 26 months.
That's why some of the other experts in these papers are arguing for an orbital depot instead.
A permanent gas station in space. Exactly. Instead of having the Mars ship meet with 15 tankers one by one in a huge rush, you just slowly fill up a big insulated tank in orbit over months. Then the Mars ship arrives, fills up once, and leaves. It's far safer and much more efficient.
Okay, so let's say they solve the gas station problem one way or another. They get the fuel, they blast off, they make the 6-month journey to Mars. Then what? The sources mention a dry mass issue. That sounds, well, it sounds potentially fatal for the whole mission.
This is a critical technical detail that often gets overlooked in the hype. Dry mass is simply the weight of the ship when it's empty, with no fuel or cargo. SpaceX's official target for Starship is about 100 metric tons. But some of these independent analyses from aerospace engineers suggest the real number, once you add all the life support, the landing legs, the heat shields, might be closer to 204 tons.
That's more than double the target weight. Why does that matter so much?
Delta V. It's the fancy term for a rocket's change in velocity, or basically its fuel efficiency.
Yeah.
If your ship is twice as heavy as you planned, your fuel doesn't take you as far.
Oh, okay.
And the math in these papers is brutal. It suggests that if the ship's dry mass is over 200 tons, a return trip from the surface of Mars becomes nearly impossible with the fuel it can carry.
You can land, but you can't leave. You're stranded.
You're stranded, unless you have a massive industrial infrastructure already waiting for you on the surface. Which brings us to ISRU.
In situ resource utilization. It means living off the land.
Correct. You absolutely must be able to mine water ice from the Martian soil and pull carbon dioxide out of the thin atmosphere. Then you use a ton of solar power to run a chemical process, the Sabatier reaction, to create methane and oxygen.
So you have to literally turn the dirt and air of Mars into rocket fuel.
You have to. But the scale is staggering. To fully refuel a Starship to come home, you need to manufacture about 2,400 metric tons of propellant. That means mining and processing tons and tons of ice in a place where the average temperature is minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit.
And you're doing this with robots that haven't even been invented yet, really.
Or at least they haven't been tested at that scale in that environment. And while your robots are out there mining, the humans are getting constantly bombarded by radiation.
The sources were pretty grim on the radiation front.
Earth has a strong magnetosphere, a magnetic shield, that protects us from the worst of the sun's radiation. Mars lost its magnetosphere billions of years ago. On Mars, you are completely naked to the cosmos.
So what's the solution? You can't just wear extra sunscreen.
You have to live underground, or in habitats with massive shielding. The papers recommend about 15 grams per square centimeter of polyethylene, or packed regolith, which is just Martian dirt.
And you still can't go outside for long.
And you're still at risk from what they call solar particle events, or SPEs, a big solar flare. If a major flare hits the planet and you're caught out on the surface in a rover without enough shielding, it could be a lethal dose of radiation in minutes.
It really makes you appreciate the magnetic field we have here. We just take it for granted every day.
We do. But let's play this out. Let's assume they solve all the engineering. They get the fuel, they build the shields, they establish a self-sustaining city. This raises the wildest question of all.
Who owns it?
Who makes the rules?
This is our final section, sovereignty and law. And this is where the conversation shifts from engineering to political science fiction.
Except it's not just sci-fi anymore. It's literally in the terms of service.
The Starlink terms of service. I love this detail. It's just hidden in the fine print that nobody reads. Tell us what it says.
So in the user agreement for Starlink, which is SpaceX's satellite internet service, there is a specific clause that governs services provided on Mars. And I'm quoting here, it says, Mars is a free planet and that no Earth-based government has authority or sovereignty over Martian activities.
No Earth-based government has authority. That is an incredibly bold statement to slip into a legal document.
So, are they space pirates or space libertarians?
Maybe a little bit of both. But this is a direct legal challenge to the entire framework of international space law we have here on Earth.
Which is based on the Outer Space Treaty of 1967.
Right. That treaty, signed by almost every country, says that space is the province of all mankind. It explicitly forbids any nation from claiming territory on a celestial body. You cannot plant a U.S. flag on the moon and say, this part is America now.
So it's treated like international waters on the high seas.
Exactly. The law says that jurisdiction follows the ship or the person. If an American astronaut commits a crime on Mars, they are tried under U.S. law. But the land itself, no one owns it. But SpaceX is essentially saying, we aren't a nation state, we're a private company. And on Mars, we believe in self-determination.
The General Counsel for SpaceX has even mentioned publicly that they are drafting a constitution for Mars. They're talking about founding it on principles of direct democracy.
But here's the friction, the real-world problem. If SpaceX builds the city, if they control the airlocks, if they manufacture the oxygen and recycle the water, they are the government.
Precisely. It doesn't really matter what a treaty signed in 1967 says. If you are the one who controls the oxygen valve, you have absolute sovereignty over everyone in that habitat.
The ultimate monopoly. Follow our rules or, hold your breath.
It brings us back to historical examples like the British East India Company. In the 1700s, they weren't just a business trading spices. They had their own armies. They minted their own currency. They wrote their own laws. They were a corporate sovereign.
And they answered to their shareholders, not to voters.
Exactly. And we are potentially looking at the birth of the East India Company of the stars. If Musk's colony survives and thrives, the Constitution of Mars won't be based on the U.S. Constitution. It'll be based on the engineering constraints of keeping everyone alive.
Which brings this entire deep dive full circle, doesn't it? We started with President Trump trying to buy sovereignty over Greenland using the hard power of tariffs.
Old-school imperialism, buying territory for strategic control of shipping lanes and rare earth minerals.
Then we moved to Europe.
A continent struggling to maintain its own economic sovereignty against those same pressures, trying to use laws and legal bazookas to protect itself from being squeezed between the U.S. and China.
And we ended on Mars,
where a private company is attempting to create sovereignty from scratch, writing its own laws based on the sheer physical reality of survival and resource extraction.
The common thread here, through all three stories, is that the very definition of ownership is being tested.
It's being tested like never before. Is ownership a piece of paper? A treaty signed by diplomats? Or is ownership just? Who has the physical ability to take something and hold it?
Whether it's the water ice of Greenland or the water ice of Mars.
Exactly. The scarcity of resources, both here and out there, is forcing a radical reinvention of sovereignty itself.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought. We've covered a lot of ground today. What is the one big idea you should take away from all this?
I think it's this. We are all used to looking at a map of the world and seeing these neat, clean lines dividing countries, nation-states. That's been the dominant model for centuries. But look at the trajectory we've discussed.
Go on.
We might be moving from an era of nation-states to an era of company-states, or at least powerful entities that completely blur the line between corporation and country.
And if a private entity can control the gateway to the Arctic or the air supply on Mars?
Then maybe the whole idea of what a country is becomes secondary. So the thought I'll leave you with is this. If Elon Musk can credibly declare Mars a free planet and start writing his own laws, is Donald Trump trying to buy Greenland really the strangest thing we've talked about today?
That is a heavy thought to end on. Is the future a country or is it a corporation?
Or is it just a subscription service?
Don't give them any ideas. Breathable air, $9.99 TM a month, ad-supported version available.
Premium air with extra oxygen is extra, of course.
On that slightly dystopian note, thank you all for listening. We hope this helped you connect the dots between the Arctic, the Atlantic, and the Red Planet.
It's all one big story about power and resources.
It really is. Thank you to the learner for tuning in. Keep asking questions, keep digging deep. We will see you in the next deep dive.